What up guys? So I saw a couple of movies that were on streaming services, and this is going to be a short video because I have other things that I'm working on. So the first movie I saw was M3GAN. This was directed by Gerard Johnstone. I haven't seen a single thing he's made, so I guess that's unfortunate for me. Not really. James Wan actually came up with the story, and I do admit that the concept is pretty interesting on a surface level. Familiar, but still pretty interesting. But man, does it suck that they had to tame the shit out of this movie. M3GAN was going to be an R-rated movie originally, but James Wan decided it would be a good idea to tone down the violence to make it more effective, because the less you see it, the more your mind can fill in the physical consequences. Well, that only applies to certain types of movies. The Blair Witch Project is a good example because it's about an unseen terror, and Drag Me to Hell, which the filmmakers reference as their choosing of toning down this movie, was by a filmmaker, Sam Raimi, that delivered concepts outside the inclusion of violence. So yeah, M3GAN would have definitely worked as an R-rated movie, but because Blumhouse loves money, they softened it up to get more people to go see it in the theater, let's be honest here. So as far as the actual film goes, it was below average. The reason why I say this is because it's the most predictable movie ever. You've seen this idea done before, and the movie does nothing to subvert or add anything new. Now, that being said about the concept being a good idea earlier, the only thing is that there's more ways that you can actually do this, but instead they go with the killer doll idea. At this point, you're waiting for the movie to get to the quote-unquote interesting stuff, but even then I was still pretty bored. So this main chick character decides to rebuild her prototype doll for her niece after the loss of her parents, creating a fully conscious AI for her to play with, because that's just gonna work out well, right? Right off the bat, this thing is already showing signs of self-awareness and defiance, and this chick waits till much later to do something about it, and even then it's too freaking late. So this movie is supposed to be about the over-reliance of technology, because that hasn't been explored before, but why at the expense of stupid characters? If Blade Runner taught us anything, is that you might want to install some sort of failsafe into this thing, or install barriers or limitations around its programming. I'm not sure how she didn't consider that an idea, but it seems like a rookie mistake for somebody that's been building things for quite a while, including a freaking robot. I mean, it seems like common sense just left the building. This ties into how M3GAN is programmed to have her attachment to her niece, but attachments involve emotional investment in that person, and that's a terrible idea just to give her something to play with. This thing should have been programmed to be an emotional support and positive guidance, but not to a degree where she is attached to her. I don't know if that makes any sense, but whatever. We need the robot to go bad so the inventor can make stupid decisions so that the movie can be exciting. The effect of M3GAN was pretty convincing though, except she was doing that stupid, embarrassing dance for no reason. I had no idea she was programmed with provocative dancing for no reason. The performances were all pretty mid. The little girl did okay, but nothing special. She did well enough to where she wasn't distracting. I'll just say that. The film definitely gets dull after the second act and does nothing new afterwards. It pretty much plays exactly how you expect it to. I honestly don't really care much about Blumhouse films. They're just getting more and more unappealing to me. Some people really like this movie. I think it's pretty boring and stupid, so I'm just gonna give it 1.5 stars. Didn't care for it. And next I saw the movie She Said, directed by Maria Schrader, and it was better than I thought, but by a very small margin. The highlight is, of course, the performances. Both Carey Mulligan and Zoe Kazan did great. You could feel their desperation, the emotional toll this investigation had on them. Never once did I ever feel unconvinced by the affected magnitude of the investigation also. Everybody actually did pretty great and made the experience pretty watchable. But what's the downside? Well, I wouldn't call it a downside, but I would say that it holds the movie back, and it's pretty much a personal flaw. But I feel like this movie was just repetitive. It really fails as a cinematic experience, and I wouldn't have a problem with that if the budget was like limited or something. The Man from Earth is a dirt cheap movie, and it shows, but the other elements of the film make the experience, especially the script, incredibly absorbing and entertaining. Here the budget is higher, but there's nothing effective about the filmmaking. A lot of times it's just shot reverse shot, characters sitting across from each other and talking, characters sitting in front of an office desk looking at the computer, characters walking from or to their car or towards somebody. I wouldn't have a problem with this if the film didn't overstay its welcome, which it does. This movie didn't need to be 2 hours long. I mean, I support what this movie's about, and I'm glad they're telling this story, but the runtime just couldn't sustain my engagement that long. I do like how they had actual celebrities, at least the ones that they could get, tell their stories, because it feels pretty real, and it can only come from them. I do have a huge nitpick, and that's the audio coming from phones in a very unrealistic, amplified manner. I'm absolutely sick of that. Just turn the audio down instead of blasting it and making it seem like the phone audio is louder than it actually is, unless you're like on speaker speakerphone. It bothered me every time they did it, and like I said, movies need to stop doing this, honestly. Overall, I didn't think it was bad. It was decent, but nothing I could care to revisit again. I can't really get into these investigation type movies except maybe All the President's Men or something, which was great. But yeah, this movie just wasn't really quite up there, and overall it just didn't engage me. I'm going to give this a generous 3 stars, and I feel some people will probably like this more than I did. And lastly, I watched a movie called Actual People. This film was shown at Slam Dance 2022, and it's the directorial debut for Kate Zoar, who also wrote the film. Now overall, it's not terrible, but personally it was nothing special. Now I'm not saying that there aren't people out there that won't enjoy this movie, but the plot is all too common at this point without really adding anything new to this concept. I can think of more than a few other movies that have already tackled this type of story much better. And I'm also not saying that Zoar was supposed to make a masterpiece, because this was a dirt budget indie film, but I do feel like some rethinking and a rewrite would have definitely helped breathe some life into this familiar plot. It really does feel like your typical millennial Gen Z type film, practically checking the boxes of the millennial type film list. At times I was waiting for something different to happen, but the movie practically went exactly the way I figured it was going to go. The performances teetered from barely serviceable to annoyingly unconvincing during some of the more dramatic parts. The filmmaking was competent. Zoar definitely knows how to use a camera, but the film has some of the most consistently odd lighting choices I've seen in a while. I mean, every single scene just has this dim lit lighting. Now look at a film like The Whale that had dim lighting with some actual lighting contrast to help emphasize the story and the themes. Now I understand that she's going for grounded realism, but even a movie like Once, which was probably a lower budget than this movie, had more convincing and less dim lighting. It's not really distracting, but it gets pretty stale seeing the same lighting in every single scene that takes place indoors, but it's still a competent first timer, and I can definitely see Miss Zoar making improvements, and she'll probably come out with a better film in the future anyway. So I'm gonna give this a generous 2.5 stars out of 5, because everyone starts out working with what they have and they get better in the future. Alright peeps, peace. Damn dude, that's some bullshit. Oh, so I gotta do like a dodge, double dodge, okay. Oh look, she was gonna do that right after. Really? Wow.